Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy Jonathan Macri with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. I am coming at you live a little after 8 o'clock, joined by my friend, compatriot, and last night at least, my bar companion, Jeremy Cohen. Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
Hello, John. Doing well. For those who are perceptive, you might see a different background. I moved. So if you see nothing on the walls behind me, let me tell you, trying to figure out the feng shui of the room. I got to figure out exactly where things go. But you've got a great setup behind you. Living room's moving along nicely, but bedroom, we're struggling here. So
You're in the bedroom right now.
I am.
Which I can't tell because it's just a blank wall.
It's just a wall. Given the secrets.
Like this podcast, it's a blank slate as of now.
Before I also don't have dancing children behind me for whatever that's worth.
I was about to say, before we get started, I told my oldest that she could say hi to everybody. So, Sash, you want to say hi? Hi. Okay, that's enough. Go to bed. Give me a kiss. Bye. All right, I love you. All right. That wasn't a kiss. That was like a headbutt. I don't know what that was. Close the door. All right. Well, now that that's over with, I'm so ashamed to. This is how much I've been in my own stuff recently. I did not even know that you moved until you literally just said it. When did you move?
Friday. It was a big day. A lot of.
I know you were moving. I just didn't know it was.
Yes,
it was now. Yeah,
did it over a couple weeks, and then the big move was Friday. So here we are.
Okay.
Exciting.
Well, there you go. You liking the new digs?
It's great. It's nice to have this place. Lucky to have it. It's great to be still in New York City, and that's. I'm glad I have space to do this still.
Well,
it's nice. I don't have to hide my bed using the microphone anymore. Amazing. Moving on up.
That's all we got to do is move up, keep moving on up in the world.
Yep.
I'm trying to think, is there some symbolism here between you getting new digs and the Knicks embarking on a new journey of their own? The days didn't match up quite the same, but life without Jalen Brunson. It started a little bit more than a week ago. What was that Laker game? Laker game was on a Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
March 6th. Yep.
Yeah, and then they played the Clippers the following night on Friday. So I guess they beat you by about a week. But as you said, you've been doing the move over a couple of weeks. So yeah, we could match that up. Man, this is weird because so I know you haven't said anything publicly since before the Portland game.
Mm-hmm.
And or it's actually since before the Sacramento game, because this was the 3-game week. And I was thinking about it today. I think this is like the longest that I've gone without commenting on games, because I didn't comment publicly on the Portland game and I didn't comment publicly on the Warriors game because I wasn't on either post game. So this is going to be like kind of a different kind of thing for us today. I see Andrew's rundown here. We have a couple of topics that we want to get to. I want to do the same thing I did last week. I want to toss it to you to see where you want to start first, because I think any of these things are valid.
Let's start with the Mikal Bridges, Tom Thibodeau,
I think,
section of the week.
I think that's appropriate. So we should say that for anybody who may have missed it, the only news that has emerged since that day when Mikal Bridges made his public comments, which were followed by Tom Thibodeau making his public comments, were reports of a meeting. And we should say Mike Breen mentioned this on the broadcast during the Portland game, but it wasn't as clear as Ian Begley then later made it, which was that Mikal and Tom spoke before that game. They smoothed over whatever was going on, or at least that is what we have been told. I already kind of commented on this, so I'll just toss it to you, and then we could go. How big of a deal do you think this is? Let's start there.
I'll say medium, right?
Okay.
And the reason I say medium is I wondered, is this kind of a game of telephone that we're subjected to? Is there a level of drama that we're seeing that perhaps wasn't quite as dramatic, and then we as fans interpret it in a different way? I don't really know. Was it a serious conversation? Weren't there, but it was enough where Mikal Bridges was comfortable talking to the media about a very hot topic, and then clearly some dissent from Thibs leading to them talking about it. And it's one of those things where I have no problem with how Mikal Bridges feels.
Mhm.
I just to Jeff's point when he and Sean were talking about it, I I just wish it hadn't left the group chat. We don't necessarily need to know about a lot of these things. I Am I happier that we know about it? Not really. I just it's just another factor that we have to consider about the team and the dynamic, and I just wish it hadn't exactly been stated publicly because it's one of those things where the Knicks over the years have done a pretty good job of keeping things in-house, and I feel like it's been a pretty drama-free team, and there are going to be instances, of course, where it happens. But before this point, the largest thing we could point to was Josh Hart's comments about
Yeah.
egos. And I didn't think that was extreme. Same way how I don't think this is super extreme, but it was one of those things where it's like, do we really need this to be said? Because you could say 100 things the right way, and you could say one thing that could be interpreted the wrong way, and suddenly you've created conversations and narratives about something that just don't necessarily need to be out in the open. So again, no problem with how Bridges feels whatsoever. I just wish that we didn't necessarily know about it because the idea that Bridges going to the media about this changes Tibbs, like, that's not going to be the impetus. Tom Thibodeau is not going to have this come to Jesus moment because Mikal Bridges went to air out publicly how he felt. And so then why is he doing it? And you can want to put it out in the open. That's his prerogative. I just don't know why it needs to be said in that manner. But I hear how he feels. I think it's valid.
So for you, this is about a player who had slash maybe still has um an issue with something that the coach is doing, namely playing him a million minutes, and decided to air that grievance publicly. Okay.
Yeah. I also don't think that it's just about the minutes.
So, okay, you open the door for me
Mhm.
and I'm gonna walk through it.
Please.
I'm gonna go a step further. I don't think it's about the minutes at all.
Mhm.
And I know I promise you I've not heard anything to like give me a leg to stand on with this theory. This is just it's something that I thought a little bit at the moment, and then I have only kind of dug my heels in over the ensuing days, which is that if I had to guess, I actually don't even think I would wager a not insignificant sum of money that Mikal Bridges doesn't care one iota about the minutes that he's playing, and that the reason that he spoke up about the minutes is that he knew that was the most hot but that was the easiest hot button issue to press.
Mhm.
And that of all the things that he could say that would raise eyebrows and cause, the exact thing that happened, which is that, oh, see, here's one of Tim's players just leading the league a minute saying, here's what to play all these minutes. Mikal Bridges is many things. A dumb man is not one of them. And I'm sure they talked before the game, and I'm sure Mikal said the things that he needed to say, or on paper that would make it seem as if he is maybe feeling a little bit of remorse and I didn't realize that's not how we do things here and yada yada yada. Maybe he made an excuse of some kind. I don't know. I have no idea. This is all guesswork on my part. But I think he knew what he was doing. And I think it was about, as you say, a lot more than the minutes. And I think the fact that Bridges went out there and had it's flip a coin between that and the Spurs game, right? His best game of the season. They're 1A and 1B, I think, in some order. And that's why I'm so happy that you wanted to start here because it's easy to say that whole incident was an off-court issue and leave it at that it has nothing to do with what's going on the court. And yet, I think there's a lot of crossover. And I think those two things are intimately involved. And I think Mikal Bridges' frustration, and I would bet that he's maybe not the only one who is feeling a little frustrated, is that, like, that he is maybe feeling like he has not been maximized over the course of this year. And I think that that's really interesting, especially when you consider that I think for the first time under Thibs, there are some questions about whether he is getting the most out of the roster that he has been given, with the noted exception of 21-22. The reason I think I'm putting 21-22 in a different category is that whole thing was such a disaster. And Thibs could have done this or that, and it would have been akin to moving deck chairs around on the Titanic, because like the Kemba thing just like totally didn't work. There was a lot of stuff that went wrong that season. Like Julius went through whatever he was going through. I put this in a different category. I think the Mikal thing is the first time, and look, there's been complaints about Thibs for a while this season amongst many people in the fan base. That's the first time that my eyebrows, and they've only raised more over the past couple days, that like, man, I'm not going to sit here and be like, I think Thibs is a goner this summer, but I wouldn't bet on him being back if you gave me even odds. And that has changed considerably, probably from a few weeks ago.
Chaos is a ladder. And I agree with what you're saying. To be clear, I saw this really great tweet that stuck with me, and it had nothing to do with basketball. It was purely about where it's like when people get angry, I'm paraphrasing it, but when people get angry, it's like all of what led to that moment was a lot of sadness, but you don't see the sadness, you see the anger. And that's the culmination of all that sadness. And maybe there's more to it than just the sadness for Bridges, but this is someone who, was talking with Kev about this last night. Like he didn't ask to be traded for 5 first-round picks, but he was. He's not the one who's necessarily putting him in the position to need to succeed. That's largely on Tom Thibodeau, but of course, Bridges has a role there too, and relegating him to more of a spot-up player when that's the category he has the highest frequency in, that's just not maximizing value. So I understand his level of frustration there, but I just don't. I'm with you. I don't think it's purely minutes based. I think that there's a way for him to express his frustration without calling it out exactly what it is. Because if he says exactly what it is, it's a problem. But it's almost a red herring, and it's not to say that the argument he's making is invalid or that that's not a thought of his, because he does have players. He is an Iron Man. He has his regiment. He has his routine. I'm sure that he would like to play a little bit less, especially as we get into the later times of the season where you want to rest up for what really matters, which is the playoffs. But he also has friends on this team, notably Cameron Payne, who I think has had certainly plenty of opportunities, Landry Shamet, who's working his way back there, and others too, where he's trying to get others to play. And, an angle, I don't think this is necessarily shade, but one thing to consider is when he says that, is he also advocating for others to play so that maybe someone else plays less? Like, it's not just himself, and it's not just, oh, let's give other guys a chance. It could be in his mind of, if we're not going to get the spacing we need from someone like Josh Hart, and he's playing 40 plus minutes a night, let's get someone else in there without saying, stop playing Josh Hart. And that, again, I feel it's salacious to say that because we've even opened that door because Bridges talked about it in the first place. But it's a thought that then comes to my mind of maybe it's not purely about, hey, myself, Mikal Bridges in this position, I would like others to play instead of me, at least get some of those minutes, and it benefits me too, but also benefits others, because maybe when you subtract something from the equation and add something more positive, that's a factor. I mean, we're kind of going on a slightly different tangent here, but I don't know about you, John. I did not enjoy the minutes where 60% of the rotation, or not the rotation, but 60% of the lineup that was out there was a complete non-spacer with Josh Hart, Precious Chua, and Mitch Robinson.
Let's get to that. But first, I want to go back to something you said.
Yes.
Is there about like what Mikal chose to speak up about? If Bridges says something along the lines of, I haven't been comfortable in my role all year. I don't think I'm being, and he would have phrased it in a way that was more delicate, because again, super smart guy. If he was like, yeah, I mean, like, they're asking me to go stand in the corner and just wait to catch and shoot. Like, I've done way more than this. I can do way more than this. I did way more than this in Phoenix, and this is not like people complaining. I gave up or they gave up 5 first-round picks for me plus a swap. Well, why did they do that? They did that because they wanted me to be an integral piece and not go stand in the corner and wait for a kick out and then just have this thankless job on the other end. Any version of that complaint, yeah, it might have made Thibs look bad, but it also would have made Bridges look bad too, because there would have been a certain sentiment of like, dude, like, go do what your team needs you to do to win. I think there would have been other people who would have completely co-signed what he said. And I think there's a lot of, if that is one of his issues, I think would be a lot of truth in that. And now we're transition. But I think he went to the thing where there was no one that was going to hear that and be like, oh, stop complaining, Mikal, because everybody agrees the minutes are objectively insane. Getting to the Josh Hart part of it, I think it's a natural segue to talk about what happened on the bench in the Warriors game, which is, and these dots may not seem to connect, and I'm going to try to connect them. And again, this may be crazy town, but I'm going to go there anyway, because I feel the crazy town sometimes. So Josh Hart is getting into it, or Thibs says something to Josh Hart somewhat angrily, and Josh Hart clearly says something back to him. I don't think we've seen video of Josh's mouth moving. I'm not a lip reader. It just seems like Thibs is shouting a bunch of obscenities. I don't know anything.
Specifically one.
Well, yeah. One.
There was one root that was there.
I don't know about you, Jeremy. I don't get that mad very often. When I do, it is never all about the person that I am directing my anger to. And I'm just going to say it. Like, when I lose my shit at my kids for doing something, and again, I understand you wouldn't have any idea about this because you don't have kids.
No.
But when I lose my shit at my kids, I'm always really mad at myself, because whatever it is that they did, I am like, I'm projecting, because it's like my kids are 8 and 4, and whatever it is that I'm mad at them for, really I'm mad at myself for either something that led up to that or something I didn't do in the moment that would have prevented the thing from happening, like any number of things. And I'm happy to admit that. I think there's a big part of Thibs right now that is like, I'm running you out there and you're my guy and you're making me look like an asshole. And that was him maybe losing his shit a little bit as much at himself as it was losing his shit at Josh Hart. And we keep waiting for it to change and for Josh Hart to have this turnaround. And I, again, talk about, getting a little ahead of my skis. I came on after the Kings game and I was like, oh, by far the biggest deal of that game is Josh Hart making 4 threes in 6 attempts and shooting them confidently. I thought that was the beginning of a turnaround. Turns out I was wrong, because it hasn't translated. So again, I'm going to go back to the Thibs part of this. I think this all ties together. And look, if he goes out there, not him going out there because he's not putting on a uniform, but if the team goes out there and they are cohesive and they look good in the playoffs, we're going to look back on this conversation and or at least I am, and I'm going to laugh, because we'll be like, oh, remember that time I thought that Thibs might be in danger of losing his job because of things that he did in February and March. It matters what you do in April and May and ideally June. So this could all look ridiculous and all be meaningless. But boy, oh boy, it feels like we are heading in a very particular type of direction. Barring what? I don't know. Let me ask you, barring what? What would need to change? I mean, we could probably come up with a list of things, but...
Well, Thibs will be judged primarily by how this team performs in the playoffs, but it does all build. Everything that happens in the playoffs is an extension of what we are seeing. Like, you could say the Knicks could flip the switch, and if they do, that's great. But then what got them to flip the switch? How did they get to that point? And the reactions that I've seen of Thibs, and he was a lot more reserved than in reality when asked about the Bridges comments than the tweets of it. I read the transcript before I saw it, and it was a lot calmer. It's hard to look at another business's dynamics, like what their culture looks like, and point to it, because guys get heated all the time. I mean, Kevin Durant, he and Budenholzer, I think it was last week, got into
Yeah.
it, and then they cut away, and it was like, wow, look at Kevin Durant. But then if you actually see what the video after they cut away from the broadcast was,
Yeah.
they made up. It's heat of the moment. It's guys who just, they get out of their system, they're good. So it's hard to judge from those moments, especially if we're looking for them and want to point them out. With that said, yes, I get what you're saying, and I don't even think it's incorrect. I largely agree, where it's like, it's not purely about that. It's not purely about Josh Hart. First off,
Yeah.
yes, it's, dude, I'm vouching for you. I'm putting you out there, and Knicks fans would probably collectively say, at least for the most part, like, no one's asking you to give us as much Josh Hart as you are. Like,
Yes.
there's a value of Josh Hart. There's a law of diminishing returns, perhaps, once you exceed where he's playing and who he's playing with. But that's part of the story, but a slightly different story. But it also feels like someone where at a certain point, if you start running out of lifelines and you feel like your back is against the wall,
Yeah.
do you kind of reserve yourself, take that step? Okay, here's how we can make positive change, or do you lash out more? And in a league with a ravenous fan base for, and just, I'm not even talking about Knicks, just NBA fans that love drama, that love the
Yeah.
behind the scenes, you are giving inspiration to new thought. And when you have multiple things happening, it feels like a pattern. It doesn't feel like it's separate incidents. But then when they happen and they converge in the same week, then it feels even more like, where is this team's head at? Why did we get to this point? How are players feeling? Where do we go from here?
I-
So I'm with you.
I'm going to drive us halfway down a detour, and I'm going to leave it to you to decide if we want to go down it. Because Aaron, Jesus, been a long day. Andrew wrote this in the rundown. That should we touch on the Knicks teammates dapping up Draymond? You know, a couple of assistant coaches too. Thibs, I believe, was there too. After the game, in light of or following Draymond's very public comments, on the record, and then his chance to apologize for those initial comments and not taking that chance, frankly. And I thought coming off looking even worse after he had a chance to apologize and didn't. One could, I think, if one wanted to, look at this Mikal thing, look at the Hart thing, go back to Hart saying we got to have no egos. One could look at that showing after the game and say, boy, oh boy, last year's Knicks team would never. If there was a player who came out and said something about one of their own and then doubled down on it, that person would not be getting any pleasantries from anyone in the locker room, because that was the ultimate all for one, one for all. Now, the reason I'm trepidatious about even going there is I think there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that Cat is not utterly beloved within the locker room, and I think he is, to the point where I would not be surprised if, like, maybe he conveyed it either vocally or it was implied to his teammates, like, look, Draymond's gonna Draymond. I don't care. It's everything's fine now. Like, let's just act normally. Don't get into it with him tonight. Don't make it about anything. And then Cat and Draymond got into it in the game a couple of times. So, like, I don't know what to do with this. And I'm like, should we keep making this snowball bigger, or are we just, is this a couple of content creators looking to create content? I'm genuinely asking because I don't know the answer.
So let's start from the beginning. First off, I felt that Draymond's comments on Cat missing the game were inappropriate. I thought his response to it with the apology, which wasn't actually an apology. It was more of an, oh man, wow, heart goes out to him. That's unfortunate. That I'm just reporting what I heard, but the Draymond Green podcast will go on. Also inappropriate. No remorse whatsoever. Someone who clearly does not know what humility is like.
Nope.
Go to last night's game where they clearly got into it. Not each other's biggest fans, that's for sure.
No.
And then after the game, when you see Draymond's comments, where he basically is saying, "Yeah, Cat had a great game. Um, glad I motivated him." It's like, I mean, it's amazing that you would think that that was enough motivation, that you are the reason why he showed out. Like,
Yeah.
why an all-star starter and someone who is likely headed towards all NBA status had a great game because of you, Draymond Green. That's
And
that's your belief.
one other thing, he was like, yeah, to counter the narratives that are like out there that have nothing to do with me.
No, nothing. Now, that's where I'm at in terms of players and coaches dapping up Draymond and the fans' response to that. I think there's going to be a large disconnect.
Okay.
To me, it's not something. It's not that I don't care about it. It's more that I think we're viewing these players differently than how they are in real life. These are people who are multimillionaires who have relationships throughout the NBA. And we have all been in awkward, probably less significant on the scale, but awkward situations where we're caught in between one person and another person because we have a mutual relationship both ways.
If you see someone's ex at a bar,
Right,
like, are you going to be like, I'm going to ignore you now because what? Like, no.
This mindset of tribalism, this like 90s, why do you have PJ Tucker if not to knock Draymond Green on his ass? Like,
No,
it's
not the
this
league anymore.
bloodlust or like the drama fill that you're looking for. It doesn't really exist because these guys in real life
existed for 20 years.
Right, like they're pretty much all friends. They all have good relationships, and it's similar to, it's not the same because the stakes are far lower, but it's similar to watching a political climate and perhaps seeing two parties where the people disagree, but those in charge are chummy with each other because it's a different world. We do not exist in that world. So, do I love the fact that OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges or someone might have gone up to Draymond Green after his comments were insensitive towards Karl-Anthony Towns? I don't whatsoever. But also, like, who's to say that? What if the Knicks had done this thing where they don't do it publicly, but then in the the back of the arena when there are no cameras, if they're all greeting each other, then we just don't see it. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We just happen to see it publicly.
Yeah.
So I understand why fans want to have that feeling of screw Draymond, terrible person. Why are we supporting that? Support your teammate. Totally get that. It's just the reality of these are people who have relationships and it doesn't necessarily transcend. And I understand that with the Timberwolves last year, Ant and others, they did a great job of siding with Karl-Anthony Towns. I think that there is something to be said of why is this team not unified a little bit more than we want them to be. Yeah. But it's still just a complex situation where these are people who have different working dynamics. And to us, we see them on the screen playing. And whenever we have access to them, it's the parasocial relationship that we're just not privy to. They're real people with real relationships.
It's LeBron's league versus Jordan's league.
Mm-hmm.
When it was Jordan's league, that was the way they went. And even Jordan, for all the celebratory platitudes he gets for being this ruthless killer, the thing that allowed him to be the ruthless killer was the fact that he was chummy with everybody off the court, playing card games and this and that. And he was like the most popular guy. Everybody wanted to be friends with Michael Jordan, and he reciprocated that. LeBron, it's obviously a little bit different, but whatever. That's a different conversation for a different day. Look, we've been talking for half an hour, and it's been a lot of negativity. Meanwhile, the Knicks just went 2-2 on a really, really, really tough West Coast road trip. And you could say that they were a miracle shot away from going 1-3. That's fine.
They were 2-3, just to be clear.
Yeah, sorry, post yes. Brunson. I'm putting the Laker game aside. 2-2 since Brunson, 2-3 overall on the trip. Obviously had chances to win the Laker game, should have won the Laker game. We talked about that last week. We don't have to rehash it. Tied or down 1, whatever it was in the Clipper game with like 6 minutes left. And, I look, I thought DJ did a fantastic job opening the monologue after the Warriors game by talking about how the last 6 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it was an example of a ship without its captain. And that was very obvious. There were 2 turnovers in those last 5 minutes that were not great. That said, I thought they got some pretty good looks and missed. Like Karl Anthony Towns had 2 really good looks, I thought, from 3, and he had been 3 for 3 from 3 before that, and then he just missed his last 2. I thought Josh Hart's midi that missed was a good look. If I recall correctly, the Deuce McBride turnover was like he was trying to push the pace, and it didn't work out. Like that's the sort of thing that happened. So I agree that they missed Brunson. At the same time, I think that was just like maybe like it's 5th game of a 5-game West Coast road trip, and like it's the end of the 4th quarter, and your leg's gonna be tired. So I think they really represented themselves well on this road trip. And if I'm really gonna pull us back from my concerns or concern trolling, whatever you want to put it, about what's going on behind the scenes, I don't think a team that has serious locker room issues or culture issues is going to go out and play as hard on defense. And I think they've been playing as hard on defense as they have all year. I think they've executed on defense as well as they have all year. And I think for as much as their offense is stuck in the mud at times, I think they're playing really unselfishly, maybe too unselfishly I don't know that I'll go that far. So like, I think whatever concerns there might be, I don't think those are translating to on the court. So let's leave it there, and then I want to hit on one thing, and then we'll move on. So, what thoughts on that?
It was overall a good week. I know we led with the top story, which was not a positive one per se, but they throttled the Kings. I mean, absolutely demolished them. Had the Blazers, who are a better team than their record would show, dating back to January 1st. If we're looking at the efficiency differential of points scored per 100 possessions minus the points allowed per 100 possessions, the Blazers are a positive 1.3. That's good for 15th in the league. Do you know where the Knicks are in that?
Over what's time frame again?
Since January 1st.
Since January 1st, net rating since January 1st?
Cleaning the glasses net rating.
My guess is they are 13th, 14th, 16th, something like that.
14th at plus 1.6. So they're neck and neck with the Blazers dating back for the last 2.5 months. And that says a lot about how the Knicks have slumps a bit while still winning games, and how the Blazers have achieved, and Scoot Henderson finally kind of being here and his emergence, and amongst other players.
A lot of close wins for the Knicks, and then some of their losses, obviously, against those better teams have been blowouts. So
yes,
kind of skewed.
Exactly. And you want those games to be better. You also you don't want them to be as close. Certainly, you don't want them to go overtime. You don't have to rely on an incredible game-winning 3-point shot at the buzzer in order for that to feel like a win. Because if it's a loss, we're having a completely different conversation. And
oh my god,
it's not a fun one. So there's that. And then this Warriors game, which I agree, I thought overall was a strong showing. My largest contention. Really, I mean, there are a couple ways you could go about it, but I look at the fact that it really felt like a numbers game, because the Knicks, they outshot the Warriors from field goal attempts, and they out-rebounded them.
Yep.
But the discrepancy between the 3-point shooting attempts was so massive. Like when you have 41 attempts made from beyond the arc by the Warriors,
or
to
taken
24.
Yeah,
no, just attempts. 41.
No,
versus
yeah,
24.
you were saying 41 attempts made. It was
they did not make 41 threes.
Yes.
They took 41. They made 13. That's a pretty low percentage, 31.7. And the Knicks took only 24, and they hit 9 of them at 37.5. And this is part of where the players in Precious looked lost campaign, had a miserable game. I know that we're leading further into the losses as opposed to the wins, and I don't mean it in a cynical way. It's more just, what are we learning from these losses? And the thing that I walked away with from this Warriors game was, why is it that the Knicks are being put in a position where they are incentivized to shoot fewer threes? or rather, why is there not the incentive to shoot more? Because when you're playing, as mentioned, Josh Hart, Precious Achiuwa, Mitchell Robinson, you are inherently shrinking the floor and putting so much pressure on the other two guys where those guys aren't going to shoot or make threes. They're not going to be respected at all. And when you look at the fact that, and I know it wasn't really a 3-point game at the end, it was the one shot, but it was so close that if you're looking at margins, that could be enough to sway a game. And I understand Jalen Brunson wasn't healthy, and maybe that changes things against a really good Warriors team since they got Jimmy Butler. But you don't have Jalen Brunson. So why are you making life harder on yourself to creating opportunities to get you more points? That's where I struggle.
I think the minutes where it was Hart and Precious and Mitch on the floor together, do I think those minutes lost them the game? I don't. And the reason is because I think I should have this up and maybe I could look it up really quick. I think if they were outscored in those, first of all, it was like 4 or 5 minutes, if that. And I think if they were outscored, what am I wrong about that? Or
No, you're not wrong in terms of the quantity. I disagree. But I wanted to let you.
Yeah, no. So it was not a lot of minutes. And if they were outscored, they were outscored by like 2 points. But to your point, it is a microcosm of the season, because how many times have we and it's really, it all goes to the Josh Hart thing, because the fact that Josh Hart is leading the league in minutes, and actually he was tied with Bridges, but like ahead by like decimal points coming into the game. I don't know which of them played more minutes in the Warriors game, but whoever did, I'm sure, is now leading the league. But he's right there. The point is he's 1 or 2 in the league in minutes. And it's a tougher conversation to have with Brunson out, because now it's not like, well, why is Deuce McBride playing 22 minutes and Josh Hart is playing 42 minutes? And one guy spaces the floor very well and the other one doesn't. It's tricky now, because now, like, again, that's why I thought DJ did a great job, where he was sitting up there in the monologue and be like, yeah, I understand I'm advocating for Landry Shamet. But the fact that I have to sit here and be like, why didn't we get Landry Shamet down the stretch, speaks volumes that DJ said that about where Josh Hart is right now in terms of when things are not going well. And God knows they were not going well in that game for him, that we even are having this conversation. So yes, I agree with you. The 3 non-shooter lineup is a microcosm of other bigger issues, which gets back to where I started. All that said, Campaign 0 for 4, Josh Hart 0 for 7. We talked Towns missed those 2 threes at the end. Like, pick any 3 of those shots to go down and the Knicks win this game. So, like, I don't want to go too crazy with it, even though I think there's a lot of validity to everything and all the complaints that people have. I guess the more interesting thing for me, and the last thing I want to talk to you about, is the offensive struggles. Whether Thibs could make this adjustment or that adjustment, it's getting a little bit more water out of the rock, but still right now it feels like getting water out of the rock because they just don't have that classic lead initiator. Brunson will be back at some point. We should mention Sham's report that he'll be back late March, early April, which is when I think we always assumed he'd be back. So it was kind of like not a big deal to me that he reported that. At some point he's going to be back and the offense is going to be better, but also they have the second best defense in the league over the last 9 games. Now, Brunson was here for about half of those. The number has gotten significantly better since he went out. They've given up 106 point something in the last 4 games. So an elite defensive number. The balance is obviously going to change when Brunson comes back. And I think that's the really interesting part for me right now, is I watch them defend really well and have these struggles on offense, which the coach may not be helping. Like, does this ultimately help them for when Brunson returns? And or maybe the different way to ask the question, if you're kind of being pessimistic, is like, is the good that Brunson's going to bring on offense, is it going to be enough to outweigh the potential negativity on defense? Now, I think it obviously will, but I'm sure there are people out there asking the question.
Yeah, it's worth asking. It's the defensive portion in which, yes, it looks great, but then the offense, the works are just all gummed up. I think since he went down, the Knicks have the 25th best offense.
Yes, yeah, they're just above the Orlando Magic, which is not where you want to be.
Yeah. So this goes further into, okay, there's some good moments that the Knicks have experienced, but the jury's still out. But this is where I've been hesitant in terms of this is a great opportunity for the Knicks to figure it out. And then Brunson goes right back into the swing of things and everything's good.
Yeah.
Guys are getting it. It's like, okay, well, why are things necessarily going to change? Because I see an offense that's not fitting well, a defense that's doing great because you've taken away one of your primary offenders on the defensive end, but you've then lost your best offensive players. So you're winning games really more the Knicks way. And I think the thing about this week, the drama aside, part of it felt positive, not just because it was winning games is good, right? I mean, of course, that's always a good thing to win games here, but it also just felt like adversity. It felt like this is a Knicks team, and it's not really fair because the Knicks have benefited from being a largely healthy team this year.
Yeah.
But this, to me, as one thing I was thinking about was the Knicks have not had a tremendous amount of adversity. And when we think about what a good story looks like, a good story has conflict
Yep.
because otherwise it would just be pretty boring. It has conflict resolution, and then it either has a great ending or you kind of go down in flames. And I think anything in the middle, you're probably left feeling like, well, that was a little annoying. I would have rather been really disappointed because then I could be angry about this, or really excited because then I could be happy about this. And this Knicks team has just kind of felt like a coast along in terms of the vibes where it doesn't feel like there's that pivotal, oh crap moment. How do they pick themselves up and move on? And when Brunson got hurt, that's where you could start to be like, all right, this is a real testament to how this team will make or break itself. And defensively, they're really good. And there are fans who are going to be excited about that because there's that grit and tenacity that this team has been missing. That's what makes the Knicks and New York so tough. And you lose the offensive side. So how do you find that balance? How do you find the offensive side coming into the picture when you've lost someone like Brunson? Really hard to do, but great that you're at least excelling on the defensive end, because if you're not going to be good on one side, at least be great on the other.
It ultimately, perhaps unfortunately, comes back to Josh Hart, because if the question is, can the Knicks maximize their offense when Brunson returns to the degree where it outweighs the drawbacks that will then come with him returning on the defensive end? I mean, Hart, assuming he's still having these issues, is just going to factor massively into that, because I'm old enough to remember when the Knicks starting five was having many issues with Jalen Brunson, and there was a lot of pointing to Josh Hart and what he wasn't doing. And I hate to put that all on Josh, but like that's just kind of where we're at right now. Good time to transition into we'll do a quick kind of standings check. I'm not going to say what we're going to do next because Andrew will get mad at me. So I'm just going to be like, we're going to do a quick standings check. So despite all of this stuff, Knicks are still in third place, which is good. They are 6 games back of Boston. You could put a RIP sign on any race for second that you may have imagined still existed. 4 games up on the Bucks. And 5 games up on the Pacers, 6 games up on the Pistons. And if you're into magic numbers for clinching a playoff spot, maybe 5, 6, something like that, probably combinations of Knicks wins and I guess Hawks losses, because Hawks are in 7th. I don't think anyone's thinking that. I think mostly, if anything, the concern is, can we stay in 3rd? And also maybe people looking ahead to like, okay, who's going to be in 6th? I maybe there was a second after Brunson went down where I was like, oh shit, are we gonna fall like pretty far down? I'm not worried about that right now. I think they've shown enough that, and especially given the schedule coming up, and we'll do predictions later in the episode. I'm not really worried about the standings. Like I feel pretty comfortable, especially given that they have the tiebreaker. Are you in the same place?
I am.
No.
Again, it's either okay, the Knicks are in 3rd place, and that's exactly where they're destined to be, or they then fall into a different side of the bracket. Either way, after winning the first series, which is not a given, they would have to then face a pretty elite team. So you got to beat at least one of them to get far. That's really the long and short of it.
I'll tell you this, be careful what you wish for, but I've been trying to watch a lot of Milwaukee, and I've been trying to watch a lot of Indiana. those two teams are very inconsistent. I maintain that I want nothing to do with Indiana, and me and Benji talked about this a little bit recently on, I think, the Patreon pod. But like the notion of like, yeah, bring on Giannis. I get that the Knicks seem to have the Bucks number, and the matchups seem to strongly favor the Knicks. But like, if you watch the Bucks on the right night, and I get it, they're not playing the Knicks. They have one more matchup left this season. We should note. You'd be like, man, are we sure we want what to do with that team in the first round? So I have kind of been now come on the side of like, I kind of hope the Pistons just stay right there in 6. And I understand that'll be a dogfight and it'll be a pain in the ass to play them. And Cade is awesome and the whole thing. But that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, it's having confidence in the team that got you to this point at the very least. Pistons are a young team, but that means they're an inexperienced team.
Yeah.
And but even, the Hawks, they're still winning games. They have not been a great matchup for the Celtics. And if everything ended with the play-in tournament when they win, that's a tough matchup for them. The Orlando Magic, they will take a bite out of you no matter what. That's a tough matchup to have. Eighth, if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers. So there's no walk in the park. There's too much talent in the league. There's some teams. Would I give Atlanta or Orlando a strong chance of beating Boston or Cleveland? I probably would not. No, but if it goes 6 games, it could add up to more reason to play. More injuries can happen. More at stake. More fatigue. You never really know. So it's not going to be easy no matter what.
Yep. Well said. We'll give out some game balls.
Yes.
Okay. Game balls, for anybody watching the show for the first time, are given out to a player, coach, or entity that stood out this week and deserves special recognition. As my daughter just walked in the room looking at me ominously, maybe she wants a game ball. I go first. Give me a few minutes, I'll be in. I go first because I won the week.
Mm-hmm.
Back on my shit. Feels so good.
Mm-hmm.
Feels so good.
Yeah.
What can I say? I'm gonna give it to Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns, I thought, was quietly really, really good against the Blazers. I thought he had arguably his best defensive game of the year against Portland. Really, really good. And he was certainly efficient, hit some big buckets when it mattered, even though he didn't take a ton of shots on the game. But this is really for his performance against the Warriors. I know he dropped too far a couple times on Steph Curry. I get that was a big deal in the moment. I get that it's Steph. If there's one guy in the league you can't do that against, it's Steph. I get it. How Cat has handled himself in response to the Draymond Green thing, and then how he went out there and he backed up his not like he didn't get into a Draymond and then just backed up like that quiet confidence. But really, I thought had, I get it. 29 points on 21 shots. Not something you're going to write home about. He's had certainly more efficient games this year. Against that defense, which like they're one of the best defenses in the league and they were locked in and God knows they were motivated. I thought that was special stuff. Really, really special stuff. I feel badly for him that he missed both of those last 2 threes. I would have loved to see one of them go down, mostly for him, as much for, the Knicks and us, their fans. But yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns gets my game ball.
It's a good choice, just especially with how he performed against the Warriors. So my game ball, I'm going to give it to someone who didn't contribute anything negatively whatsoever this week, but also didn't contribute anything positively. John, I'm giving my game ball to Jalen Brunson.
Sell me on this.
Sure. I think that Jalen Brunson's absence this past week, with everything hitting the fan, tells you exactly why he is a great leader. And when you lose someone, when he's absent, the moment that things get a little chaotic, like the teacher's out and no one can really replace who's able to run the classroom, I think that's a factor. And I know you could say, well, that says a lot about the classroom, and maybe it does. But to me, we see a pretty even-keeled team. Like, do you believe Mikal Bridges makes those comments if Jalen Brunson is there? I don't, especially because it hasn't happened all year when he's been healthy. Do you believe that when the dust up that happens with Thibs and Hart that we're talking about as a factor because of a potential pattern, because of what happened with the Bridges thing, is talked about. I don't. Do you think that the Knicks talking with all these players, with Draymond Green at the end, when they would go to someone like the captain of this team and say, Jalen, what are your thoughts on this happening, or Draymond's comments, or that? You have a voice in the room. That voice all week was not there. And look at everything that we're talking about. The 1 week, I don't think it's a coincidence that the 1 week that we're talking about the most drama filled of any weeks is the one where Jalen Brunson's not here.
Yeah.
So if I give it to him because he's clearly shown that he can command the level of respect where players stay in line. It's disappointing though when perhaps the attention shifts away the moment he's gone. You got to be able to trust everyone if you leave. And that just hadn't been the case, whether that's on us as fans as well for feeding into it, on members of the media for reporting the story, which is their job, to be absolutely clear.
Yeah.
But it just, Brunson provides you with a level of comfort that the Knicks just otherwise don't really have. And I think from the fan perspective is needed to steady the ship.
Worthy choice. I do want to give a small shout out to Mikal Bridges for what was an outstanding week. 3 games, shot 60% from the field, 40% from 3, 9 of 10 free throws, 10 free throws in 3 games, which for him is like a miracle. 15 assists in those 3 games, and tied for the team lead in plus minus at plus 33 with another guy who probably candidate for this, Deuce McBride. That moves us on to detention, which we wouldn't have had to do if they had pulled out the game against the Warriors, but alas, given to a player, coach, or entity that deserves to sit down for a while and think about what they did wrong. Jeremy, you're first up.
Thank you for remembering, because that's a first. So I appreciate that.
It is not a first.
Well, it feels like it is.
First in a while, but it's not a first.
It's funny though, because you're so used to winning, and yet you can't remember the one thing that I get when I lose, that's fine. So
I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
That's fair enough. I will give the detention to Josh Hart. Okay. The Warriors game was just egregious in a lot of ways. Nearly cost the Knicks. The Blazers game with the moving, with the inbounds play, that was a real fun one. Just wasn't his usual self. Again, I think he's overextended, which is not necessarily his fault, but then we're seeing him take on the burden of that in a lot of ways, and he's not producing in that sense. Speaking of incense, Owen Phillips, who is great online. He's got a Substack, the F5. He came up with something called involuntarily defended by centers, also known as incense. And that's among guards and guard forwards who have played. Josh Hart is consistently one of the most matched up players with the opposing player being a center. And should mention as well that Owen spent 2 years working with the Knicks, and now he's back to working on his Substack. So it just highlights, okay, so where are you putting this piece? So you don't want to start Josh Hart anymore. That's understandable, but then you're pairing Josh Hart most likely with Mitchell Robinson, which then shrinks your floor even more. So how are you scheming around that? Are you moving Josh Hart out of the lineup? Okay, well then maybe are you putting Mitchell Robinson in the starting lineup? You could do that. But then how does that impact Karl Anthony Towns? How does that impact the offense? Because now you still have a non-spacer, one who is even more unable to shoot the ball. You're then getting the rim protection, but then you're also opening Mitch up perhaps to more of a possibility to injury risk because he's playing against superior players. He's playing heavier minutes. Then you have to stagger the minutes accordingly, where then you sub Cat out so that when you sub in Hart, you're not playing Mitchell Robinson and Josh Hart. So then you move Cat back. There's so many moving pieces, and I understand the logic entirely of when Jalen Brunson comes back, you don't have Josh Hart in the starting lineup. It shouldn't have to be one or the other, but you're going to run into problems where you have Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson, and they're going to need to share the floor together at some point, and it's going to restrict your offense. So Is there an easy solution? I don't think there is. I think there's some matchups that they can do to adjust, but it's just not simple. And I wish that Josh Hart could be a better spacer because Mitchell Robinson's not going to change. He's not going to be a shooter. It's not going to happen. Josh Hart, you would certainly hope that he can do a better job, but that is one place where I do understand where Thibs is in between a rock and a hard place because of the lack of spacing that he's going to have to get one way or another. But that's also a personnel issue that the Knicks have to sort through.
I think it's a worthy choice. It was one of the top two choices that I was considering. You went with the addict. I'm going to go with the dealer. I'm going to give it to Thibs.
Yep.
The thing about Mitch, though, if you put Mitch in the game, Mitch goes in the dunker spot. You can't just slot Josh Hart in the dunker spot because he's 6'4", and he just. I know Mitch does not exactly have the hands of a Greek god, but he is a threat there. And if you are an opposing center, like, you cannot ignore him. Josh Hart is being ignored to the point of absurdity right now. And they are, again, like, I know I'm giving it to Thibs. Are they trying to look under every stone to try to figure out ways to deal with this? I wrote a whole newsletter about nothing but the last 7 minutes and the overtime period in Portland, highlighting all of the different ways that they literally brought Josh Hart into every action over the last 12 minutes of basketball of that game, with the exception of one. And that one went terribly. And so they're trying stuff, but there's no law that says you need to play this player 40 minutes a game or 38 point whatever he's averaging right now. And again, I get it. Brunson's out right now, so it's a bit of a different conversation. But this has been a long running thing, as my daughter's begging for attention here. So I won't belabor the point anymore. I'm going to give it to Thibs. Listen, you mentioned the word humility before, right, Jeremy?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that humility and Tom Thibodeau are two things I often think about in the same sentence, but maybe he needs to show a little bit more humility. And maybe if he did, everybody, including Josh Hart, by the way, perhaps most of all Josh Hart, would benefit from it. So there you go. Shall we? Predictions?
We shall.
Okay. We are going to predict the week. The upcoming Knicks schedule. Monday night, they play Miami. We're almost done, I promise. Wednesday, they're not at San Antonio. No, yeah, they are at San Antonio. Sorry. They do go back on the road. Thursday at Charlotte, and then Saturday versus Washington. So, again, on paper, very easy week. Washington, or Miami, rather, has lost, I think, like 7 games in a row or something crazy like that. But, like, they do have a road back-to-back here where they go in San Antonio, who is currently not trying to win games, and then they go on the road to Charlotte, who I think just put up 145 points on some sad sack team earlier, like a week or so ago. So, like, look, I'm up first. I'd love to go 4-0. Can't do it. I'm going to put the ball in your court. I'm going to make you have the tough decision. I'm going to go 3-1.
I'm going to go reluctantly 2-2.
Interesting.
Well, also the Wizards just beat the Nuggets.
They did.
They've won 6 of their last 10
before that, and that was a tough game against the Pistons.
Yeah. So they're doing well, all things considered, in the small window of time here. But it's a tall task to have them go 4-0 when they play 4 games in 6 days. They just came off of a West Coast trip. It's a lot to ask of them. So 2-2. I hope you're right. I hope you win, but 2-2 it is.
Well, I hope we're both wrong, and I hope they go 4-0. But
Sure.
One step at a time. Hey, look, a lot of negativity on this episode. Team's playing really well, and there's stuff, to be desired with a lot of people. But I think, for as negative as we probably were in this episode, I feel good actually about where they're at, and I feel good about how things are going to shape up down the stretch of the season. And I'm excited for them to have this opportunity to go out there and continue to play well against some teams that they should be able to do well against if they keep playing like they were. So
I don't want to go into a semantics argument, or at least discussion, but is it negativity or is it criticism?
It's
You know what I
you're
mean?
right. That's
Like
exactly
we're not negative about the team overall. We're not like
100%.
looking at this and saying sky's falling or anything of the sort.
No.
It's just there was some stumbling. Hopefully they've regained themselves. Hopefully this was just a drama-filled week that we can put in the rearview mirror, and then they're good.
I'm here for that 100%. Well, thank you for adding that at the end. Okay. On that note, anything else, Jeremy, before we go?
That's all for me.
Okay.
You?
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Kev. Yes.
I was gonna say to everyone who came out for another Knicks Film School watch party. Thank you. It was still fun, even if the outcome was as expected. And there's another one that's, I believe, coming up.
Where hold off on announcing
Maybe
the next one because we're
that's
TBD. The next Film School watch party, but there is going to be another one upcoming. We guarantee you that. Thanks, Kev, for producing. One more shout out to Mark, who had his 40th birthday party at T Square. It was a great time. Was had by all. And don't think I'm forgetting anything or anybody. Stay tuned for more good stuff this week. I think we have a milestone coming up on the YouTube channel. But I will I guess I could say it. We're pretty close to 20,000 subscribers. So if you're watching right now and you're not subscribed to the Knicks Film School YouTube channel, maybe you could be subscriber number 20,000. How cool would that be? On that note, thanks everybody for checking out another episode of the show. Be back with more fun and games before you know it. But for now, peace out.